All right, let's get into it. It's going to pop up here on the YouTube here in just a second. I say that. I hope I'm not already on the YouTube. Getting to go. Rolling. Let's do this. Let's get after it. Let's have some fun. Plenty of stuff to get to here on the Houston Texans and DeMeco Ryans. This is the guy we're watching right now. This is who we're all paying attention to right now. DeMeco Ryans and Denver is what we are all paying attention to right now. We got to pay attention to DeMeco and Denver because that's the guy that most Texans fans want right now. That's the guy most Texans fans want. And that's the guy that Denver is finding themselves zeroing in on. Let's talk about the Denver situation here real quick. They've interviewed, it feels like, the least amount of candidates. They've interviewed Sean Payton. They've interviewed DeMeco. They've interviewed Dan Quinn. And then they've interviewed Jim Caldwell. And those are the final four guys for Denver. That was this morning when Mike Kafka, who's worked in Denver forever, covered the Broncos forever. That's what he said. Those are the final four was DeMeco Ryans, Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, and Jim Caldwell. If you don't know who Jim Caldwell is, former Colts head coach, former Lions head coach, former offensive coordinator for the Colts for a while. Kind of a wild name to be in there at the end. Caldwell hasn't coached in 2 years. Well, today, Dan Quinn takes his name out of the running. And the Sean Payton stuff has cooled down. So DeMeco Ryans kind of feels like the guy. DeMeco Ryans kind of feels like the one that the Denver Broncos are zeroing in on. We're going to talk about that and so much more. Get in on the comments. I want to hear from you guys. I appreciate Josh letting me know that I started early. This live stuff is still new to me, okay? This live stuff still new to me. We're going to have some fun. Late night Texans. Not everybody's up this late. Not everybody's up when all the other great YouTubers are doing their YouTube content. Landry Locker's fantastic. Okay, not everybody's near the YouTube. I like this late night crowd. Let's get late night crowd in here and let's have some fun. Vincent, Carlos, Joshua, everybody in here. I'm having a blast. Let's talk about this. All right, DeMeco and Denver. Let's really get into it here. Let's really get into DeMeco and Denver and why Texans fans should be stressed out and why Texans fans should be very leery, of the Denver Broncos as the type of team that could take DeMeco Ryans away from you. If you want DeMeco Ryans to be the Texans head coach, watch Denver. They're the only team that can take DeMeco Ryans away from you. Okay? Now, everybody's got to pry him away from San Francisco, but Denver's the only one that can take him away from you. And with Dan Quinn out of the equation, because he's sticking around in Dallas, DeMeco makes the most sense for Denver. He's a fantastic defensive coordinator. The leadership conversations that we hear from these stories in The Athletic, the players that are currently with him, the stories in Sports Illustrated. I mean, DeMeco Ryans feels like an absolute no-brainer as a head coach for the Denver Broncos and where they are. And with the Sean Payton news kind of cooled down, with the Sean Payton news kind of, maybe he's going back to Fox, Denver is kind of hanging around in the conversation, but they're not so sure about this. And I'm not also sure that Sean Payton maybe didn't overplay his hand a little bit in some of the ways that he's approached these things. DeMeco makes the most sense for Denver. Let's get into why DeMeco would take the Denver job. Okay. I will say this right off the bat. There is no shame in losing to Denver if you're the Houston Texans. You lose to Indianapolis for a candidate you really want, that's shameful. You lose to the Arizona Cardinals for a candidate that you really want, that's shameful. Carolina Panthers already hired their coach, can't lose to them. There's no shame in losing to Denver. They're in a totally different spot at a totally different organization than you are right now. The Denver Broncos are supposed to be competing for a championship. The Denver Broncos are supposed to be really good in the AFC West. The Denver Broncos believed they were going to be Super Bowl contenders last year. That's why the Denver Broncos had Russell Wilson on their team. That's why the odds had the Denver Broncos as one of the teams that was making the playoffs last year. That's why the Super Bowl odds were so short on Denver compared to where they were. They had gotten a new head coach. They'd gotten a new quarterback. They had some pieces on offense. They had some pieces on defense. The Broncos were supposed to be excellent last year. They were an absolute joke. Now, in large part, that was because of Nathaniel Hackett, their coach. It never made any sense that Nathaniel Hackett was the coach for the Denver Broncos. Hackett had had one successful offense with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then he was a coach in Green Bay. I understand that the title was offensive coordinator, but he was the coach in Green Bay because he didn't call the plays. LaFleur, the head coach, called the plays. All right, so Nathaniel Hackett takes over. He's the coach, and they're a disaster last year. They are an absolute joke. They're a laughing stock in the NFL. Ironically, week 3 of the season, they defeated DeMeco Ryans. Now, they only scored 11 points, and 2 of those came by virtue of Jimmy Garoppolo pulling a Dan Orlovsky running out the back of the end zone. So really only scored 9 points on DeMeco's defense. Okay? So they're in a position where they've got a veteran, highly paid quarterback. There's no quarterback flexibility. Russ is the QB going forward. Okay, for the next half decade, Russell Wilson is the quarterback of the Denver Broncos unless he retires and gets out of football. They have a ready-made, built defense. Going into last year, that Denver Broncos offensive line was not bad. It was not a great offensive line, but it's not a bad offensive line situation. So I say to you again, it's okay if you're the Houston Texans and you lose to the Denver Broncos. It's not going to feel good. You're not going to love what occurs. You're not going to love that aspect of it, that you didn't get the guy you wanted and that he picked the Denver Broncos. But you cannot compete with the fact that the Denver Broncos have a franchise quarterback who's already showcased what he's capable of, have a defense that's ready to compete right away in a crowded, tough division, and have a solid offensive line with some solid skill position players. You can't compete with that right now. So if you lose to Denver, it's okay. It's not going to feel good. Anytime the pretty girl tells you that she thinks somebody else is more attractive, it doesn't feel good. Even if she lets you go on a couple of dates, it doesn't feel good, okay? But if DeMeco Ryans tells you the Denver Broncos job is more attractive, it's okay. It's okay. You weren't competing for the right type of thing. If DeMeco wants that, then DeMeco can take that job. Here's the tough part about what's DeMeco's attraction to the job. Because if I was a head coach candidate, Lord knows I like to think I'm pretty damn good at Madden, but I couldn't do what these guys do, spider 2 wide banana and calling all the plays and stuff. If I was a head coach candidate, would I tie my candidacy to Russell Wilson? Look, I ran you down Nathaniel Hackett. He had 2 offenses in the 20s. In Jacksonville, they had 1 top 10 offense while he was there, and it was bookended by those offenses in the 20s. And, yeah, it was bad. Russ looked bad last year. You know what Russ looked like in Seattle before he went to Denver? Not like himself. Not like the guy that was winning Super Bowls. Not like the guy that people crowned the midseason MVP like 10 times. Okay? Russ is on a decline. Russ has already hit the apex of his powers. Okay? Now, how fast he goes down the other side of that mountain is what every coach who's thinking about the Denver Broncos situation has to think about. Every coach has to think about Russ is not ever going to have those Russ games every week ever again. But how often is Russ going to have those games? I could not, in good conscience, tie my coaching career to Russell Wilson. Not right now. And I understand that Russ has said all the right things. And maybe in this offseason, he's done all the right things. But I could not tie my career to Russell Wilson. Not the way that he played the last year in Seattle, and certainly not the way that he played this past year. So why DeMeco Ryans would want to do that doesn't make a lot of sense. But Russ is a proven commodity. Russell Wilson has showcased what he's capable of in the NFL. I love Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young is the bee's knees. I want the Texans to get Bryce Young. I even kind of like C.J. Stroud a little bit. And I kind of enjoy the thought, the idea of C.J. Stroud teaming up with Jackson Smith and Jigba in Houston. I don't like Will Levis, and I don't like Anthony Richardson. I like those 2 quarterbacks, Stroud and Young. Never played in the NFL. We don't know anything about Young and Stroud. It's all projection. Russ is a proven commodity. And if you lose to the proven commodity at quarterback, you can't get too upset as a Texans fan. That's the primary reason DeMeco Ryans would want to take that job, is he doesn't believe Russ is cooked, and he believes he can win right away with Russell Wilson. And Oh, by the way, the people that own the Broncos, and this is why I have Ryan's comment up here, the people that own the Broncos are gazillionaires. They got more money than just about any NFL owner. So if they want to write a big, fat, out of character for a first-time head coach check, DeMeco Ryans will listen. It's not just the money, though. The McNairs ain't poor, okay? The Texans can write a big check to DeMeco, too. They're not poor, okay? But the Walton family that owns the Broncos, they were embarrassed last year. That's why they fired Nathaniel Hackett. And they want to make a splash, and hiring one of the best young coaches in this cycle would be making a splash. And they're not afraid to write a big check to DeMeco Ryans from that contract standpoint. Now, again, Russ is a proven commodity. DeMeco maybe doesn't feel like he's cooked, and they can win right away. At least that's the hope. Because Sibu brings something up. Does DeMeco want to defend Patty twice for the next 10 years? When you compare the division that the Texans are in, and you compare the division that the Broncos are in, there's no comparison as to which is easier in the long term and easier in the short term. There is one franchise quarterback in the AFC South. There is one. It's Trevor Lawrence. Now, the Titans might improve. They might get something fun and impressive instead of Ryan Tannehill. The Colts might draft one. That's a rookie. It's going to take time. The Texans are going to draft one. That's a rookie. Going to take time. In the AFC West, you've got Patrick Mahomes, best quarterback in football. You got Justin Herbert, one of the best young quarterbacks in football. And the Raiders are in the market for Aaron Rodgers. They're in the market for Tom Brady. So imagine your first 2 years as the head coach of the Broncos and the guy that's in charge of the defense and the guy that's got the least talented quarterback in the division, because Russ ain't Herbert, Russ ain't Mahomes, and Russ ain't Brady or Rodgers right now. So you're going to step into the Denver job with, yes, a proven commodity, but the fourth best quarterback in the division. And 6 games, you're walking in right off the bat with a quarterback disadvantage because Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are both better than Russ. And if they end up in Vegas with the Raiders, that's a better situation than having Russ at quarterback. And Mahomes is better and Herbert's better. 6 games. So your first 2 years, because I'm assuming Brady and Rodgers ain't playing forever. First 2 years, 12 games. Right off the bat, 12 games. In your first 34 games, you have the quarterback disadvantage without even finding out exactly who your other opponents are for at least 2 years. 6 home games, 6 road games. You walk in with the worst quarterback. Man, that's got to be a scary thought. That's got to be a real scary thought if you're DeMeco Ryans. You got to really think about this if you're DeMeco Ryans. Okay? You got to really think about this if you're DeMeco Ryans. But guys don't think about failure. Okay? That's one of the big things. And I said this to Landry, and if you know who my buddy Landry Locker is, you probably already subscribe. And if you haven't subscribed to Landry Locker on YouTube, go subscribe to him. I said this to him last week. We got to quit thinking about failure because these coaches don't think about failure. We got to quit thinking about what would happen if something doesn't go right. Okay? If something doesn't go right, we got to quit thinking about that and start thinking about what happens if they go wrong. These guys think they're all great. And these guys all think they're going to be awesome right away. So they're not super worried about the division. They're not super worried about the opponents. It's certainly something we pay attention to, and it's certainly something I'd pay attention to if I was a coaching candidate. But DeMeco Ryans, who, again, if you're just getting in or you're just tuning in, he seems to be the guy that the Denver Broncos have circled in on. And Nathan says Peyton would be better off in Denver than DeMeco. And maybe the DeMeco stuff is to kind of entice Sean Payton to get off the couch. Maybe it's to get Sean Payton to the negotiating table. Get him back there. It'll give him the heads up that, hey, we got other options, Sean Payton. If you want to go stay at Fox or you want to flirt with the Arizona Cardinals, we got other options. We'll move on. We'll move on from your ass, all right? That's kind of what I think this DeMeco thing is, but I also believe Denver's absolutely, without a question, in on DeMeco Ryans, and they'd be happy with it. You know, Vincent says some of the other things. about the Denver situation. Cody, it's not even about Russell Wilson. There's no draft capital there, and they have a low salary cap. True, but they have less that they need to get done with that money. The Texans got a big salary cap. They don't have a lot of good players. They don't have a lot of good players. They got to go spend a bunch of money, get some good players, and then they got to go draft a bunch of good players. Now, Denver still has a first-round pick. It's a ladder first-round pick. It's the 49ers pick, so it could be 28. It could be 32, and then we're in between there. It's going to be in the late 20s at the very best. So they still have a first-round pick, and they've given up some of those mid-round picks to go get Russ as well, but they have extra stuff from some other trades that they've made. So it's not as dire as, say, the Rams situation, but it's not as good as the Texans. That's the appeal of the Texans too, by the way. The appeal is this is a blank slate. This is your team built in your image, built the way you want it built. That's the pitch to every one of these head coach candidates from the Houston Texans. It's a blank slate. The only thing that is for sure on this team is we got Laramie Tunsil left tackle, we got Titus Howard at right tackle. Do with the rest of it what you will. Jalen Petre's a nice player, play him at either safety spot. Damian Pierce, he can be your lead running back, or you want to go sign one in free agency, or you want to go draft another one and have a little tandem, you can do that. The blank slate of the Houston Texans is the most attractive thing. You want to run this type of defense? Cool. We don't have a bunch of guys that have to run this type of defense. You want to run this type of offense? Cool. We can run whatever type of offense your offensive coordinator wants to run or you want to run. It is a blank slate for coaches to paint this team and create this team in their image. And I think that's a very attractive situation for a lot of coaches. It's a very attractive situation for a lot of coaches. Now, it's a question DeMeco would have to answer in Denver. It's a question DeMeco would have to answer anywhere he goes. And Sky brings it up. DeMeco's a defensive coach. You got to think that Denver might want an offensive guy to revitalize Russell Wilson. Look, DeMeco's going to hire a good coach. I strongly believe, you look at Philadelphia, okay? You look at Minnesota, and you look at what Sean McVay did with the Rams. You look at what Zach Taylor did with the Bengals. These young guys, man, they hire some badass staffs. Look at what Zach Taylor's got in Cincinnati. He's got Brian Callahan, who's a really nice offensive coordinator to help him with the offense, and Lou Anarumo, man, that's a hard one. Lou, the defensive coordinator, he's really good. McVay for a few years. McVay had Brandon Staley on his staff. One year. McVay had Kevin O'Connell on his staff. Zach Taylor used to be on McVay's staff. You look at what Nick Sirianni's done in Philadelphia. Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon are both head coach candidates. These young guys hire really good candidates and really good staffs. Okay, I get that there's 11 offensive coordinator openings right now. I'm not worried about DeMeco hiring a coach. That's why I don't think Denver is going to be super worried about it. Carlos, I think he's a Broncos fan. He said, look, a lot of the defense taking care of him. DeMeco's got guys in mind. He can't hire them yet. He can't guarantee you he's going to get those guys, but DeMeco's got guys in mind. Max, what are these Denver insiders just blowing smoke, hyping up, put pressure on the Texans? Man, I don't get what they would get out of that, but it's just a thought. Here's the biggest thing. The timeline for DeMeco Ryans and the timeline for the Texans may not link up. But just because Denver's feeling froggy on DeMeco doesn't mean that the Texans have to make a decision right away. Get the correct guy. If you believe DeMeco's the correct guy and you've got to jump on DeMeco while you're still thinking about Kafka or you're still thinking about Gannon or you're still thinking about somebody else, go for it if you think DeMeco's the right guy. But it's worth noting, unless there's been some backroom dealings here, I would think DeMeco's still taking another interview with the Houston Texans. And I would think DeMeco's still taking another interview with the Denver Broncos. And as somebody pointed out, Carlos, DeMeco can't interview with the Colts or the Cardinals until the 49ers season is done because he did not previously have an interview with them. Okay? I think that's a really important aspect. So if the 49ers win, the Broncos and the Texans can talk to DeMeco next week. The Cardinals cannot, and the Colts cannot. The 49ers lose, anybody can talk to him. He can go talk to the Cardinals. He can go talk to the Texans. He can go talk to the Broncos. He can go talk to the Colts. So even if DeMeco wanted to talk to the Colts or the Cardinals, if they win, he can't. He can only talk to the Broncos, only talk to the Texans. And I would think that both those teams within a second interview conversation would know where DeMeco is. They would know if he'd say yes. If offered, they would know what he wants. They would know what he needs. They'd have a good understanding of what DeMeco Ryans would be as their head coach. And I would think would say, hey, you're our guy. Kevin O'Connell was the guy in Minnesota. It was widely believed he was being hired there before the Super Bowl. DeMeco coaches in the Super Bowl. The team announces him 3 days later. It's exactly what happened with Kevin O'Connell. Now, if DeMeco's out, I believe Philly's winning this weekend. As we talk right now, Thursday night, which, by the way, how about some Thursday night, late night Texan stuff, baby? Appreciate everybody being here. This is fun, man. I love this stuff. If the Eagles beat DeMeco and the 49ers and Shanahan and company, then DeMeco is a free man to get everything going. I believe he'll take a job or go back to the 49ers next week. We'll know. Obviously, if DeMeco's coaching in the Super Bowl, we'll have a good understanding. Some other jobs may get filled, but DeMeco's official announcement won't come till after the Super Bowl if he's taking one of these jobs. So the timeline is totally different based off of what happens on Sunday. A win by the 49ers, I think, extends this a little more. It allows for more conversation. It allows for that second meeting to be very interesting because it's only 1 versus 1. It's Denver versus Houston. That second meeting, it's very, very fun and interesting. If they lose, and he does want to listen to the Colts, and he does want to listen to the Cardinals, and the Broncos aren't getting good vibes from Sean Payton, they can make that offer. Not just because they offered, I mean DeMeco's taking it. Just because they offered, I mean DeMeco's going to take it. But it is interesting. And again, unless the Texans, maybe without talking to him a second time, believe that he's absolutely the guy, don't let other teams being interested in your guy, ruin what you want to do as an organization in this coaching search. All right, I got another pivot, another question here. Let's get to some of your comments here. Carlos, I also think DeMeco's the type of guy who feels challenged with taking on the best in Mahomes and Herbert. Hey, you know what used to be the toughest division in football? The NFC West. Kyler, Matt Stafford, Russell Wilson, and DeMeco's no stranger to a tough division. Okay? No stranger to a tough division. Carlos, definitely not a Broncos fan, just playing devil's advocate. Devil's advocate, Carlos, we appreciate it. We appreciate y'all getting in the comments here. Nathan, honestly, I'm anxious to see who we hire. We'll talk about some of the non-DeMeco options here in just a minute. Cebu. Okay. This is an interesting thing here. I believe a lot of this fan base is DeMeco or bust. DeMeco's the guy. DeMeco or bust. I believe a lot of this fan base is DeMeco or bust. I get it. For a while, I was DeMeco or bust. He's still my top priority. He's still the guy I like the most. There are still really good coaches if there aren't DeMeco. And we'll get to those guys in just a minute. DeMeco's going to Denver or Houston. Offer the man $10 million a year. Let's get this done. Hey, man, he's going to be rich. The Ryans family's going to be rich beyond their wildest dreams after DeMeco takes this job. They should let DeMeco draft Willie Anderson and Jalen Carter if that means we get him. See, Christian, you bring up an interesting point. I'm out on that idea. I'm out on this. I don't want something like this. I believe this coaching search needs to go down with the understanding that a quarterback is the selection at number 2, and there's no questions asked. The Texans have to leave the top 2 picks with a quarterback. I do not believe any coach should be hired with the understanding that a non-quarterback is being taken at number 2. Now, the organization may like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson to that point. As I'm talking about it, as how I would operate, I would be letting these guys know. I don't care exactly who it is, but the number 2 pick is a quarterback. And with the preference of it being Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I don't expect these guys to have strong opinions on Young and Stroud right now. The timeline of when coaches go and look at this stuff is not one where they would have strong opinions already. They would have strong opinions already on these draft picks. If they're still coaching, which Steichen, Gannon, and DeMeco are, and even Kafka just coming off of the loss last weekend, they have done zero draft prep. Zero. None. Okay? So they should not have a strong opinion on one of these two guys. But they should have the understanding that this fan base, this ownership group, and this team needs a quarterback with one of those top 2 picks. That's how I would operate. Tyler, I like DeMeco, but I'm starting to like Kafka more and more. We'll talk about Kafka here in just a minute. Double cross swine. 100%. He should get final say on free agents and draft picks. Might be necessary. The Broncos feel like they might be very willing to push a lot of power at that head coach spot. And if they do, that becomes a very attractive job. Nick Caserio is a bit of a wild card. We don't know exactly what Nick Caserio wants. I know what he said at the podium a few weeks ago. I know what he said at his press conference, but just because he said it doesn't mean that he means it. There are a few former players that express interest in some form for DeMeco Ryans. There's some that have expressed interest behind closed doors as well. I know there's a lot of Texans former players that would be thumbs up on that. Thumbs up on DeMeco Ryans. Obviously, the biggest one was J.J. Watt a week ago, last Friday, tweeting basically hire DeMeco. That's the best endorsement you could have gotten if you were DeMeco Ryans. Balin says, hey, Cody. Hey, Balin. I really do appreciate y'all hanging out and talking some Texans with us on this late night. We're going to do a lot more late night stuff, man. I like to stay up late. I stay up late, working on the radio show on ESPN 97.5. So I figured, this is kind of working on the show a little bit, just talking Texans with all of y'all. So I appreciate y'all staying up late, asking questions, talking some Texans with me. And let's get into some of these other candidates here in a minute after we get through some more of these comments. We're talking easy. By the way, if you're here, would love a like down below. Would love a subscribe down below if you're not subscribed. Nathan, about that time you did this, Cody. Lots of us been waiting. Going to be coming fast and furious all different times of day, baby. We'll do some before the show. The before the show ones will be a little bit shorter. These at night, and we can hang out, go late into the night. Cody's the next John McClain. I tell you this. I'll tell you this, YouTube. This is something you don't know. And I think I've said this on the radio. Maybe I haven't. I think I've told people this before. There's one member on the Houston Texans Media Wall of Fame in the Houston Texans press box. It's John McClain. And I believe the next member is going to be Mark Berman, who works at Fox 26. I don't know who's going to go on after that. I can tell you this much, YouTube, and we can, I guess save this clip in case it ever happens or something else happens, to my career. I really want to be on the Texans Media Wall of Fame one day. And I got a long-ass way to go before it's even a consideration or a thought. I really want to be on that Media Wall of Fame. I don't know if I want to be the next John McClain. Wouldn't mind the gigs he's got, man. The general's got it going, but he worked his butt off for about 7 million years in the newspaper industry, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody going forward. It's DeMeco or Jonathan Gannon. Okay? Vincent, we'll talk about those guys. Jose, I'm in for Kafka. Cody, who would you prefer? I think Nick likes Gannon. All right, let's talk about these other candidates here. Okay, let's talk about these other coaches. What would the Texans do if DeMeco Ryans takes the Denver job? Well, they're going to talk to a guy like Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're going to talk to a guy like Shane Steichen. Okay, Hefe put it in there. Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're going to talk to those guys. And, Vincent's part of a crew that doesn't love Jonathan Gannon. Let's talk about the Philly guys. We'll get to Kafka. All right, Carlos, you mentioned Kafka. You're having some fun with the JK there. We'll get to Kafka in a second because I want to talk about those Philly guys. I'm very interested to see these Philly guys in an environment where they can have that second interview. Because there's a really, really good coach on the Philadelphia staff named Brian Johnson. Now, if you're a UH fan, you might remember him from a few years ago. Brian Johnson's the quarterback's coach in Philadelphia. Brian Johnson's going to be a hot offensive coordinator name, number one. Number two, Brian Johnson's going to be a target for Nick Saban at Alabama, I believe. And number three, Brian Johnson's going to have the opportunity to move up to offensive coordinator if Shane Steichen leaves. You would think if Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, leaves, that the quarterback's coach would have a shot at moving up to the offensive coordinator spot. Now, why does that matter if you're talking about Shane Steichen and the Texans? Steichen not bringing Brian Johnson? Well, he might. It's worth noting, Nick Sirianni's the head coach in Philadelphia. Okay? He's the head coach in Philadelphia, and Shane Steichen calls the plays. It's not out of the question that Shane Steichen takes the head coach job in Houston, if they want him, and then brings Brian Johnson to be his offensive coordinator to call plays, kind of like what he did with Nick Sirianni. Now, Steichen's called plays for a few years now, and I'd really like him to call plays even as the head coach. So he's an interesting guy, but the Brian Johnson conversation is really fun to me. Okay? Because he's a part, not as much as Steichen, but Steichen and Sirianni and Johnson have all done a fantastic job with Jalen Hurts, as Thomas notes here. Johnson's really interesting because I got to wonder if Steichen stays, he's the offensive coordinator, and Jonathan Gannon gets the job. Would Gannon bring Brian Johnson to be the offensive coordinator? Now, a couple years ago, Brian Johnson was the OC for the Florida Gators. So your Kyle Trask was the quarterback. It was Trask's best season of his life. Made him a second-round pick. He's in Tampa now. Trask was phenomenal. He was one of the most exciting players in college football that year, and Brian Johnson called the plays for him. Gannon and Brian Johnson is a really interesting pairing. I do believe, to an extent, Gannon's candidacy took a little hit today. Now, what's that little hit? Before Gannon was in Philadelphia as the defensive coordinator, he's a defensive backs coach for Indianapolis for Frank Wright. Frank Wright took the Carolina job today. And there was a conversation point that if Gannon got the job in Houston, maybe Frank Reich would be his offensive coordinator. Frank's got a head coaching job now. So it becomes very interesting to see what Gannon would do from an offensive coordinator standpoint. That's the biggest question a guy like Gannon has got to answer. What are you doing on offense? Okay? Yeah, he might be a leader. He might have a nice defense. Balin says, I like Gannon. Can't just be all the talent around him. This is fun. This is a fun thing about the Philly team. They got better than last year. And I know Gannon gets some flack from Philly fans. That defense was better than last year's defense. They set a damn sack record for the franchise. They had 4 guys with double-digit sacks. And a lot of those guys were just put in positions to succeed. And that's something that I believe Gannon's going to do. Oh, by the way, I bet you he plays Derek Stingley in man, which is something Lovie Smith wouldn't do. Okay. Jeremy, why do I have to hire a coach? Let's go coachless. Can't hurt. Well, at that point, Casario's the head coach. I don't want that. Tyler brings us up about both Philly guys. One of the most stacked teams in a long time. I'm sure the good coaches, but not totally sold at the moment. Tyler, I'm going to come right back to this, okay? Because I got something else. I got Balin's comment I want to get to here in just a second. Does Johnson want to tag along as OC, though? Could easily be sought out OC candidate, maybe get a better OC job than the Texans. Absolutely. And if Steichen leaves, he could get promoted. The Alabama job as an offensive coordinator is better. OCing for one of these other teams is a better job. Hell, if DeMeco goes to Denver, being DeMeco's OC in Denver is a better job than the Houston Texans job. But the familiarity of the head coach would be something that I think could be really interesting. Carlos, you think Gannon takes a true head coach role and brings another DC to run the D? Hope so. I don't like defensive coordinators calling the defense. I like them having input. I don't like them physically calling the defense. I like them to have like a I call it like a fire drill opportunity. They come in, maybe they call a play or two in a key moment, but for the most part, I like the defensive head coaches. I like those guys to be walk-around head coaches. Justin, appreciate the love, man. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're up to almost 100 viewers. Man, this is fun. All right, Tyler brings up something about the Philly teams. I promise we're going to get to Mike Kafka here in just a second. Let me adjust my big ass here and get some better seating situation. All right. Philly has a loaded team, man. And Tyler is right about this. This is a loaded squad, man. And they are really good on offense because they have the best offensive line in football, probably. And they're really good on defense because they're loaded with like multiple years of free agency investment, draft pick investment, and some really savvy trades and free agent signings. Like they got Bradbury, the corner. They got Bradbury from the Giants when the Giants were in salary cap hell. Great move. They got Darius Slay in a trade, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in a trade from the Saints that turned them into really nice players. Fletcher Cox has been there forever. Brandon Graham has been there forever. Hassan Whiteside's the basketball player. Riddick and Hargrave are free agent signings over the past few seasons that have turned into really nice players. That thing's been built up really well in Philadelphia over the past couple of years. So you're working at a little bit of a disadvantage that way, but they have gotten a lot out of those guys on defense. Over on offense, man, I think it's so impressive what Sirianni, the head coach, and Steichen, the offense coordinator, and Johnson, the quarterback's coach, and the rest of that offensive staff, I think it's so impressive what they have done with Jalen Hurts. And I think that's the primary conversation around those guys, what makes them so attractive is Jalen Hurts' development, Jalen Hurts' evolution has been a really interesting one to watch. This is a guy that walked off the field last year, didn't know he was going to be the Philadelphia quarterback to start the year. And I think if they could have got a for sure upgrade, they probably would have. But, man, that improvement for Jalen Hurts when he's a second-round pick and not as talented as the guys they're about to draft at 2, I think that's where the Philly offense and the Philly offensive coaches, I think that's, man, where you really get excited, okay? You really get excited. DGMT6. So we're going to go with Gannon and dysfunction continues. Look, man, Jonathan Gannon's not as exciting as DeMeco Ryans. Jonathan Gannon's a damn good coach, man. And Jonathan Gannon's a worthwhile candidate. Gannon's been interviewed by multiple teams. It's not as exciting as DeMeco. It's not as exciting as the offensive-minded guys. Okay? It's not. But he's a good coach. He's a good coach. Reading about this guy last year in the coaching cycle and reading about him this year, there's a really big, man, I need to find it and I tweet it out tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't, at Cody_Stutes. That's what this little guy is right here. That's my Twitter account. I'll tweet it out tomorrow. The thing about Jonathan Gannon and the Athletics. Real good read. It's worth your time. Really smart guy. Really smart guy. The thing that people rave about is a lot of the stuff they rave about with DeMeco. It's just DeMeco played linebacker here. He's exciting, and he's been a fast riser through the coaching ranks. Gannon is too. Gannon's been, he was on Bobby Petrino's Louisville staff back in the day. Petrino told him when he was a player, like, you're going to be a coach, dude. Gannon was like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep playing. He got hurt, coached a little bit while he was hurt, and ended up as a coach. It's risen through the ranks. Really smart guy. Man, I know it's going to feel like we settle if we get Jonathan Gannon. He's still a really good coach. Hell of a lot better than Jim Caldwell, Leslie Frazier, David Culley, and Lovie Smith and the other schmucks they interviewed last year. All right? Well, Gannon be that guy who targets big free agent names like to play like Payne, Edmonds, or Draymond Jones. He's going to have to add something in free agency. You got money to spend, add some stuff, get an ass kicker in there. By the way, Hargrave, one of his ass kickers in Philadelphia, is a free agent. I also think, too, he could kind of probably turn Malik Collins into an ass kicker as well. Malik had some really nice plays for the Texans this past year. He's back. He's still on the team. Malik Collins is a fantastic 6th or 7th best player on your front seven. The unfortunate part for Malik Collins right now is he's the best player on the Texans front seven. So when they add some talent around Malik Collins, Malik's going to look even better. Okay? Even better. Another thing about Gannon is a bunch of those great defensive players on the Eagles come free agents this offseason. Boom. Balin I hadn't read this yet, but Balin's making the point for me. Going to have some cap space as well. I always love when you get a new coach and you bring in a coach familiarity guy, like coach's guy. Okay? Chris Moore was coach's guy. And I think Chris Conley was too. Those guys have been coached by David Culley when David Culley got here. Christian Kirksey sticking around and was coach's guy with Lovie Smith. So coach's guy is what I think you do a lot of times. All right, we get to Kafka in a second. Justin's got a question about free agency. Then you look at upcoming free agency. A little bit. I mentioned Hargrave. Some of those other Philadelphia defenders are going to be free agents as well. A lot of tight ends. A lot of tight ends I like. Dalton Schultz, I think, is worth the big investment. Mike Gesicki, I think, is worth the big investment if you want to. That's a pure pass-catching guy. Foster Moreau. Okay? You're like, what? Who the hell is Foster Moreau, Cody? Foster Moreau. That's going to be the guy that I'm going to be screaming from the top of a mountain for the Texans to sign in free agency. He's been the backup guy in Vegas for a few years. Former LSU guy, which I have to check now or it'll drive me crazy. Yeah, former LSU guy. Foster Moreau is going to be the guy I'm screaming for them to go get. And look, Akins and Foster Moreau and Tegan Quintiriano and another guy, that's a fine tight end room. You can have some success with that. So did want to get that free agency question in there. All right, I promise you guys Kafka. Let's talk about Mike Kafka, man. Let's talk about Mike Kafka. Actually, my second favorite candidate behind DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco's my favorite. Mike Kafka's my second favorite. And here's why Mike Kafka's my second favorite. There's a bit of an unknown to him. There's a bit of a wonder kid to him. And he did a lot with a little in New York. Yeah, they got a guy that's an all-pro tackle. But for the most part, Saquon, they had to bounce back. Daniel Jones is talking about making $25, $30 million a year this year after Kafka was his offensive coordinator calling his plays for a year. Man, Kafka, they did a lot in New York with, like, the Texans have a better, like, I want you to understand this with the wide receiver room in New York. The Texans have a better wide receiver room than the New York Giants. And Kafka and Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll, their head coach, took that crew to the playoffs and won a playoff game. Here's another thing about Kafka that I really liked from this year. Calls the plays. Okay, calls the plays for an offensive-minded head coach, but calls the plays. I want y'all to think. Y'all are Texans fans in here. Think about it. I'll give you a second to think about it. When was the last time the Texans beat up a bad defense? Like, when was the last time we looked and we looked at the stats and we knew a bad defense was coming to town and then the Texans kicked their teeth in? When was the last time that happened? Like had a really good offensive performance against a bad defense? When's the last time that happened? It hadn't happened in a long time on a consistent basis. The Vikings were one of the worst defenses in football. You know what Kafka and company did? Worked them. They worked the Vikings in that playoff game. They worked them earlier in the year and lost by a field goal. I like Kafka. Young guy, 35 years old, be the youngest coach in the NFL because McVay is going to turn 26 this year. It's 26. No, McVay's already 37. Kafka be the youngest head coach. It is Sean McVay-esque if you're going after Kafka. You're going after Kafka because you believe he could be the next Sean McVay, the wonder kid, the whiz kid, 35 years old, 8 years removed from a practice squad stint with 3 different teams. 7 years removed from being a graduate assistant at Northwestern. Let me tell you how special Kafka is. Mike Kafka went from a graduate assistant at Northwestern to 2 years later. 2 years later, he was Andy Reid's quarterback coach. He was Andy Reid's quarterback coach for Patrick Mahomes. Hey, what did Patrick Mahomes do in 2018? What did Patrick Mahomes showcase in 2018? Oh, did he just have, like, I don't know, one of the best years a quarterback's had in a long time and win the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year and Pro Bowler and first team All-Pro? Mike Kafka was his quarterback coach. After being with him for a year as an offensive quality control coach, Kafka coached the quarterback. Kafka was the quarterback coach for the MVP. The year he won the MVP. Now look. Andy Reid's a genius. Eric Bieniemy deserves credit. Even some of the other offensive minds that have been over there, even some of those guys, they deserve a lot of credit. But damn, Mike Kafka, to go from backup practice squad player in 2015 to 2018, he's the quarterback's coach for the MVP. Boy, that is impressive, man. That is impressive. That's impressive. I really like what Kafka brings to the table. Smart, man. He is smart. Tyler says it. Nerd in a good way. Well, you can hear him. I like guys, too. This is going to sound strange. Look how, actually, as I'm doing this, I like my hair. I think I have good hair. I've had people tell me I have good hair. My lady cuts my hair. It's cut my hair for 20 years. She's like, oh, you got such good hair. Why? I used to buzz my head. I used to look like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I didn't look like Stone. I looked like a fat version of Stone Cold Steve Austin. I used to buzz my head. And she'd always tell me, why you got such nice hair? Why you buzz your head? Why you want to be bald? Well, I like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I like guys like Mike Kafka that choose to be bald. Everybody wants to have hair. That's why we have freaking multi-gazillion-dollar companies that put hair on people's head. I like a guy that chooses to be bald. It shows you confidence. It shows you don't care. You don't care what people think about you. You need an innovator. You need a guy willing to take a risk. You need a guy that when something's not working, like his hairline, he gets rid of it. I like bald guys that choose to be bald. Don't hang on. And if you're hanging on, my God, hang on, man. Hang on. Hang on however you want to hang on. I like hair. I'm going to have my hair till the stuff falls out. Okay? I like guys. It sounds silly, but I like guys that choose to be bald when they could have had hair. It shows a unique level of confidence, and guys who are going bald that decide to get rid of it shows sound decision making. Sound decision making. What do y'all think about that? A little too far? A little too far? Ayad Ali. I hope I said your name right. I apologize if I didn't. Ayad Ali. I think I said that right. For an Andy Reid guy over a Belichick guy. Yeah. I would. I like that Andy Reid tree. Like that Shanahan tree. Like that Reid tree. Like that McVay tree. Okay? The McVay tree, it's gotten picked over a little bit. They talked to O'Connell last year. Didn't really seem like he was, considering them. The Shanahan tree from an offensive standpoint has been picked around. McDaniel and the LaFleur guy that was in New York for a little while, whatever Saleh took, whatever McDaniel took, that offensive tree's been picked a little bit from Shanahan. Andy Reid's tree, it's got Kafka on it. Quarterback's coach in pass game coordinator to offensive coordinator 1 year, and Daniel Jones all of a sudden looks like a competent quarterback, and all of a sudden Saquon Barkley bounces back, and they make it happen with the worst wide receiver group in football. I like Kafka. Jeffrey says bald is beautiful. Hell yeah, man. If you want to shave your head, go for it. Okay? Let it get it out there. I got a lumpy head. I used to shave my head, man. Used my head. Name one good bald head coach. I'll wait. How much hair's John Harbaugh got? Also, I think Tomlin's going bald too. I guess John Harbaugh has a lot of hair. I'm probably an idiot on that one. It's Jim that doesn't have any hair. John's got the hair. Jim doesn't have any hair. What's Mike Tomlin's hair situation these days? It's not great. He always is wearing a hat, but I think he's always wearing a hat because I don't think he's got any hair left. Also, bald head coach, Andy Reid. He's got hair on the sides, but he's pretty much bald. He's been bald for freaking ever. So, I'll go Andy Reid. Lovey and B.O.B. were bald. Yes. Yes, they were. But they were old bald guys. I like young bald guys. Lovey's didn't have any hair because Lovey couldn't have any hair. Same with Bill. Kafka could still grow it out, baby. Chooses not to. They work out with King Bill. Yeah. Young bald guys better than old bald guys. Okay, you're around my age, early 30s, mid 30s. You make the decision. You know who else is bald? DeMeco. DeMeco's bald. DeMeco will be Shanahan tree. Yeah, DeMeco will be the Shanahan tree. I don't know who DeMeco's going to bring in to help run his offense. Brandon Simpson says Clay Kubiak. Yeah, the Kubiak family. The Kubiak family's going to get some run there probably. I think, okay, before looking at it, Klein's the scout for the Cowboys. Clay is a quarterback coach. And Clint is interviewed for the Clay Kubiak's assistant quarterbacks coach for San Francisco. And Clint Kubiak interviewed for the Buccaneers offensive coordinator job the other day. Dan Quinn, bald guy, younger-ish bald guy when he was good, by the way. Bald guy. Brian Daboll, bald guy. Tom Landry, big-time bald guy. I like that we're here hanging out on a Thursday night, almost midnight. We're talking about coaches' lack of hair is maybe why you like them a little bit more than some of these other coaches. Tress Ortiz, Mike Kafka or Shane Steichen, Eagles OC, no clue how you spell that. I'm not a spell checker, but pretty close, I would guess. All right, I'll ask you guys. Get in the comments here. I'll ask you guys. Sean, yeah, Dan Quinn staying in Dallas. We were just talking about coaches that were bald that had some success. Had some success. I'll ask you guys, and I want to talk about it for a little bit, and we'll kind of maybe wrap up on that. Robert Saleh, bald guy. Great call. Great call. Do they have to be an offensive guy? Do they have to be an offensive guy? There's, I think, 10 offensive coordinator jobs still available. And Alabama needs an offensive coordinator. That's essentially an NFL job because if you're really good there for a year, you get another job. So there's double-digit offensive coordinator jobs available with varying levels of what you're working with. Like the Commander's job is a crappy job. They told you that you're going to have to play Sam Howell. That's a crappy job right now. I'd rather be the Texans offensive coordinator, but I'd rather be the Bama offensive coordinator than the Texans offensive coordinator. I'd rather be the Broncos offensive coordinator than the Texans offensive coordinator. So they have to be an offensive guy to make sure that your top offensive mind is in the building already and you don't have to worry about hiring one of these offensive coordinators. Now, I don't subscribe to that. I understand the thought process, and I understand the thinking and the conversation. And I'll tell you this. If you eventually get good players, it doesn't matter what the head coach's discipline is. Because Sean McVay is one of the best coaches in football. Sean McVay's maybe the best X's and O's coach from an offensive standpoint with some of the stuff he's drawn up in the past couple of years. People rave about how smart this guy is. This guy can recite word for word plays that occurred in his high school playing days. How'd Sean McVay do this year? Stunk. They ain't got no players. He stunk. There's no players. Everybody was hurt. Cooper Kupp was hurt. They don't have any running backs. Offensive linemen got hurt. Aaron Donald got hurt. Matt Stafford was hurt. The genius offensive minds can help you take a player to the next level. But ultimately, if you have good enough players, the head coach's discipline is not going to matter. And the defensive guys seem to last longer. Think about how long Mike Zimmer lasted. He lasted over 7 years, defensive guy. Longer than Bill O'Brien. Who they were hired in the same cycle. That's why I bring that up. The 5 of the 6 longest tenured coaches have a defensive background. Andy Reid's one of the longest tenured coaches that doesn't have a defensive background. But Belichick, coach defense. Tomlin, coach defense. Harbaugh, before he was a special teams coach, coach defense. McDermott, coach defense. Who's the last guy I'm missing? Don't make me look it up here on the thing. Pete Carroll, coach defense. Okay. 5 of the 6 longest tenured guys are defensive coaches. Now, those guys got in when the getting was good and you needed a good defensive coach, and they're all great minds. You know what all those guys also had? Really damn good players. The hoodie, he had Tom Brady. Mike Tomlin had Big Ben. Pete Carroll had Russ. John Harbaugh had Joe Flacco, who played really well for a while, and then Lamar Jackson. Sean McDermott's got Josh Allen. Go get DeMeco Ryans, Bryce Young. Go get Jonathan Gannon, CJ Stroud. See if they can be the next tandem. Because when you draft a guy, like you draft a quarterback, you stick him with the head coach, you're hoping that for a decade, those guys kick everybody's ass. Now, is it easier to kick everybody's ass if it's an offensive-minded guy? Yeah, it feels like the other day, McVay got hired. You look up, he's been a coach forever. Feels like the other day, Kyle Shanahan was in the Super Bowl with the Falcons, and then he's the 49ers coach. Feels like the other day. And now he's been around. He's been to a couple of Super Bowls. And they've been he's been fantastic. These defensive guys stick around, man. If they're good, they stick around. And you know what? If they're real good, it doesn't matter who they're losing on a year-to-year basis because they'll find the next guy. They will find the next guy. You know why Dan Quinn lost his job in Atlanta? Because Matt Ryan fell apart and the offense stunk. And then he got fired because the players weren't any good. Like, defensive guys can succeed in the NFL and can stick around in the NFL. That's why I'm not in this just dyed in the wool that you have to have an offensive guy. I'm really not. All right, let's get to some of these comments here because I asked you guys, what do y'all think? Do they have to have an offensive background? This is not what I was talking about with offensive background. This is not what I was talking about. Clint or Clay, they're with K's. K Kubiak, Kubiak, Clint and Clay with K's. All right, I think we're still doing the bald guys and the Kubiak things. All right, you need an offensive guy. DGMT. Yes. Wilkes or Ejiro be possible for our next head coach or DC for our next head coach? Yeah, certainly. Certainly. If you hire an offensive guy, you hire Steichen or you hire Kafka, I'm going to be very interested to see who the defensive coordinator is. And I don't think it's out of the question that Ejiro was interviewed with the thought that maybe he might end up as the defensive coordinator if he didn't get the head coach job. No, but there should be good offensive coaches. Yeah, absolutely. Official podcast. You're right about that. You got to have good offensive guys. We'll know in the building pretty quick if that guy's worth a crap on offense. They don't have to be offensive, but go defensive to make sure he knows how to take the place for OC when he leaves for a head coaching job. Yes. You know what happens too? San Fran's about to benefit from this yet again. You know what happens when guys leave from the OC spot or they're a highly touted DC under a defensive-minded guy? You know what happens? And they're minority coaches? You get draft picks. It's not the end of the world if your offensive mind leaves. Like it's really not. It's not going to crush you. Now, it kind of crushed Belichick a little bit. Josh McDaniels left, and that thing went to hell in a handbasket. But you know what Belichick did? He hired a defensive guy to run his offense. So there's some growing pains. These young guys, though, man, I said it earlier, and if you're still here, I appreciate you hanging out. I said it earlier. Young guys know how to hire staffs, man. You look at Zach Taylor. He's hired a really good staff. What is his name? Lou Aramino, whatever. The defensive coordinator in Cincinnati. Brian Callahan's a nice offensive mind. You look at Philadelphia. Hell, two of their guys are candidates for head coach. Brian Johnson's one of the top talked about quarterback coaches in this. You look at what McVay's put together. McVay had Brandon Staley at one point, Ejiro Evero at one point, Kevin O'Connell at one point, Zach Taylor at one point. We've made fun of the McVay stuff, but McVay can hire his ass off, okay? Like, you got to put together a good staff if you're one of these young coaches, and these young guys have. Brian Daboll is another example of a guy that put together a really good staff, like Mike Kafka. Wink Martindale's a great hire. The Ravens kind of shooed him out. Next thing you know, Wink's coordinating the defense, goes to the playoffs. Now, the Ravens are still really good on defense, too, so it wasn't all Wink. Say Ben Johnson did more with Goff than Sean McVay. You certainly could. Ben Johnson's going to be fascinating to watch, man. He went back to Detroit. That's a risk a little bit. P. Heap says, hey, defense guys stick around a little bit longer. Yeah, we talked about that. As long as they're the best candidate, it's all that matters. Man, I think something that's really fun about DeMeco, when you hear DeMeco Ryans' stories and you read some of the stuff, The Athletic put this out there. When DeMeco was in Philadelphia, they used to install two defenses. One for when DeMeco was healthy and could play, and one for if DeMeco couldn't play. And the one where DeMeco was on the field was more complicated because he could help direct everybody. He could help tell everybody where they need to be and where they need to go. I thought that was great. There was a former Eagles player who was on Chris Long's podcast, told a story about how DeMeco would call the plays out to him. And then there was a 49ers player that said in the headset, DeMeco Ryans, because the headset cuts off, I think, 20 seconds before the play or 15 seconds before the play. DeMeco would call into the defensive player, the guy with the green dot on his helmet, and would say, it's going to be this play. And then it would be that play. DeMeco knows a thing or two about offense, man. I like those geniuses that could help you to an extent on offense, even though they've got a defensive background. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you DeMeco's calling the offense or should call the offense, but damn, hearing some of those stories, man, woo. Belichick was defensive coordinator for a very long time. Defensive coach, defensive coordinator for a very long time. Failed head coach in Cleveland, and then got that job in New England. Who's a better offensive guy, Steichen or Kafka? Different. I like Steichen because he was the coordinator and the play caller for Justin Herbert's rookie year. I like Steichen a lot for that because I would love to see him calling plays for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. That'd be fun, man. That'd be real fun. Those guys aren't going to have the talent that Herbert had his rookie year, but man, Steichen to have that, and then Steichen calls the plays for Hurts. I like Steichen's background. I like Kafka's potential. He's kind of an unknown, man. He's kind of just a, I just like the accomplishment that they have put together in New York with the limited amount of talent. Thank you, Anarumo. Golly. I've had a blasted time trying to say the Bengals defensive coordinator's name. That guy's a G. By the way, Cincinnati's not going anywhere because they're keeping everybody. They're keeping all their players, keeping all their coaches. I see Gannon's a guy who put together an incredible staff. Man, I think all these young guys are going to put together a really badass staff, man. I really do. The Texans don't spare any expenses. They'll pay coaches. They'll spend money. I really do think they're going to put together some really fun staffs. Russell Wilson sucks, bro. He didn't play well this year. Eggs can't be all in one basket. Man, you're right about that. Look, I think we'll kind of get towards the end here with this, man. Actually, I got one more theory, and then we'll get to the end with this. I want DeMeco. I'll be less excited if it's one of the other guys. But I'll tell you this. By training camp, I'll be so damn excited because I'll feel like there is a direction for this franchise. I'll feel like there is a hope for this franchise. All these guys, man. All these guys will be a guy that can inspire some hope of this fan base. Unless they hire like Thomas Brown, but they haven't even talked about him. I think Thomas Brown might be up as a chance for an offensive coordinator. I think Frank Ross is sticking around. He coordinated one of the best special teams in football last year. I think Frank Ross is sticking around. Balin, if Frank Ross goes, I go. They'll say it ain't so. No, Frank, no. Frank, don't go. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't remember when I did this. Hey, man, again, thank you for tuning in. We got over 100 people in here. We're having a blast talking some late night Texans. We'll do this from time to time. Last week we had Locker doing a late night one on a Friday night. We'll have some fun, man. We'll do some stuff in the middle of the day, too. We'll do some pre-recorded stuff. I'm trying to learn this video stuff, man. We're going to have some fun video stuff up. Might even do some food reviews. Okay. All right. Here's my big one. Here's my wish, if you will. And I've been talking about this for a while. Here's my wish for the Texans. You can tell me, Cody, you got a magic wand. Wave the magic wand for the coaching staff. What is it? DeMeco Ryans, head football coach of the Houston Texans. Offensive coordinator. Y'all ready for this? Offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. Cliff Kingsbury. And you're like, oh, hold on now, Cody. What are you doing, Cody? Cliff Kingsbury, he stunk in Arizona. Cliff Kingsbury. I covered Cliff in college when he was Johnny Football's offensive coordinator in Aggieland, when he coordinated Johnny Manziel's Heisman campaign. I covered Cliff in depth at Texas Tech when he was the head coach at Texas Tech. I never thought Cliff Kingsbury would jump from failed football coach at Texas Tech to head coach in the NFL. I never believed Cliff would be a good head coach in the NFL. After covering him at Texas Tech, I don't believe he's going to be a good head coach in this life. Cliff Kingsbury knows offense. He's got to be one of the top 100 offensive minds in this world. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound that impressive. Think about all these college guys. Think about all these guys that are head coaches and those. Cliff's maybe one of the 50 best minds when it comes to offense. But he's an offensive genius. at different times. Man, I would love to see Cliff Kingsbury and DeMeco Ryans running this town, man. Plus, Cliff's there to tell DeMeco, don't make this mistake. Don't make that mistake. I've had 2 head coaching jobs. I've had 2 jobs where I made a lot of mistakes. Cliff Kingsbury, man, that's the dream at the OC spot right now. Here's the tough part. Nick Saban's going to want him at Alabama. Every team that's got an OC opening is going to want a shot at Cliff Kingsbury. And yeah, you got to pull Cliff out of Bangkok. Hanging out in Thailand with the pretty lady that he's dating. Okay? You know how you do that? A little bit of change. A little bit of cashola. Okay? Get the PJ from HOU to Thailand and bring Cliff back with you. The lady can ride too. What y'all think about Cliff Kingsbury, man? Leave that in the comments on the Cliff Kingsbury on this video you're rewatching, you're going back through. Would really appreciate a subscribe down below. Would really appreciate a like as well in this video. Tell your friends about this, man. Tell your friends. I'm pretty close to 1,000 subscribers. And we're going to do some fun stuff. We'll do some giveaways, some raffles and stuff. I'll raffle off some 97.5 stuff, some 97.5 giveaway stuff, the radio station. Man, Cliff Kingsbury is the OC. That's my wave of magic wand. DeMeco is the head coach. Cliff is the OC. Frank Ross stays to coach special teams. Let's go. That's a division winner in 3 years. That's a division winner in 3 years. Give him Bryce. It's a division winner in 3 years. Maybe not 2 like the Jaguars. It's a division winner in 3 years. Balin Rios. Who's the DC? Someone DeMeco knows. Somebody DeMeco knows. Somebody DeMeco likes. One of his coaches. I need to look because the DC is going to be interesting because I wonder if DeMeco is going to call plays as the head coach. So the DC may actually be a really good opportunity, or may need to be a guy that actually can call some plays. So be interested to see about the DC spot. Tyler, appreciate you tuning in from up north. You guys have fantastic syrup up there in Canada. Some of the best professional wrestlers in the history of professional wrestling come from Canada. Chris Jericho, Bret Hart, Kevin Owens is the big dog now from Canada, amongst many others. I've seen a lot of guys. I'm down with Cliff Kingsbury. One less contract to pay for if you don't have a DC. It's funny. 49ers defense weren't that good this year. Jonathan, what are we talking about here? Their interceptions doubled this year. And they're one of the best total defenses in football. I'm a 49ers fan. Jonathan, what are we doing here, man? Being Cliff, taking Bryce will activate his PTSD. Doesn't want to coach with their 5th grader. Fair point, Darren. Fair point. Oh, Tony Bear. Great idea. Kellen Moore's going to get fired in Dallas, it looks like. Looks like. Would love Kellen Moore down here. Okay. No state income tax, Kellen. All right, go down 45 South. Stick it to Jerry. Jim, timeline. It's a good question. If DeMeco's coaching in the Super Bowl, he'll be officially hired after the Super Bowl. If he's not, I would think that next week, if they want to make that decision, they could. Let's slow our roll here. Christian Harris, not quite on the Fred Warner path. Fred Warner's a monster, though. Man, I'd like to see the Texans add a veteran linebacker. Lincoln Riley. I think Lincoln's next stop after USC is the NFL, but I don't know when that's happening because he's gonna have a monster at USC in a couple of years. Monster. Zaylen Wesley. Appreciate you tuning in, man. Head coach, love the show. Hope the Texans get Bryce Young and the Rockets get Victor Wembanyama. Be the best thing for Houston's future. # Stone Cold the GOAT. Oh, hell yeah, he is. Hell yeah, Stone Cold's the best. Hope he's at the Royal Rumble on Saturday. What? Hope he's in there throwing people over the top rope. What? I don't sound terrible when I do the Stone Cold. I look stupid when I do the Stone Cold, though. Urban Meyer's the new OC. Stop it. You have to pry Urban away from to pry him away from the damn desk. Urban Meyer got actually this brings up it's a good story. It's a good story from this week about Urban Meyer, Balin. And it has stuff to do with CJ Stroud a little bit. Urban Meyer really liked quarterbacks that could run. And Zach Smith, if you remember that name, Zach Smith is a guy that was a coach for Urban Meyer, got in trouble with some off the field stuff with his wife. But he has a podcast now, and he tells stories. He was telling stories about how they were trying to recruit Jared Guarantano, who ended up at Tennessee. And they ended up having to pivot after that, and their pivot was to Dwayne Haskins. And Urban was scared because he had gotten so used to being able to just call quarterback runs on like 3rd and 3. And so Urban was a little nervous of like a pure pocket guy like Dwayne Haskins. And Smith mentioned that Haskins was kind of the key to opening up Ohio State a little bit and getting a few more pure passers into Ohio State. And I thought that was an interesting little tidbit, an interesting little story. And that's my Urban Meyer story of the week. I don't have any more, and hopefully I will not have any more Urban Meyer stories of the week. You're not an intelligent person. I've been on the Texans Reddit for the past 6 months trying to figure out who the idiot's posting on there. It's you. I don't post on the Texans subreddit very often. I like those guys, though. They do some fun stuff. Jonathan, appreciate you tuning in. Yeah, Dwayne Haskins, man. RIP. RIP. Man, Schaub ain't going to be no QB coach. Yeah. No thanks. TJ Yates, though. I think he's an assistant QB coach in Atlanta. TJ Yates is. Had a little cup of coffee. I got his coaching career started with the Texans here as a quality guy, OC guy. All right. A little after midnight, these late night sessions, man, they're going to be fun, man. We're going to have a lot of fun in here. We're going to do some fun stuff. Plenty still to do on the coaching search. How about when we do some free agent stuff? Free agent of the week, free agent of the night, draft pick of the night, draft pick of the day. Woo! We got some fun stuff on here. A lot of really good stuff going on YouTube, man. Check those guys out. Landry Locker. I post some clips from our show on ESPN 97.5. So here's where you can find me. Twitter, @Cody_Stutes on Twitter. I'll try to remember to post that article from The Athletic about Jonathan Gannon tomorrow. So @Cody_Stutes on Twitter. Lots of fun stuff on YouTube. Clips from the show. The Wheelhouse, ESPN 97.5, 92.5 here in Houston. We've got an app. If you want to download the app, we're also on Twitch as well. So you can watch the show live each and every day, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Let's do one of these again after the coach is hired. Buddy, we're gonna do one of these a lot. Which side of the ball would I coach? Why and how? I coach special teams because I'm not smart enough to coach the offense or the defense. Okay. Lots of fun stuff. All the stuff that you need to know about the channels in the description. And look, we got almost 100 people in here. I really appreciate y'all tuning in, talking some Texans, having some fun. And we're going to have a lot of fun here on the channel over the next few months. The coach hiring is in a few weeks here. I would hope maybe next week. If not, the week after the Super Bowl certainly is a possibility. I'm fine waiting. We got plenty to talk about. When the coach gets hired, prospective staff. After that, free agency. After that, draft. Man. After that, summertime speculation. After that, hell, it'll be July. Training camp's here. You get daily training camp updates from yours truly. Woo! Eyes and ears at training camp. Man, we're going to have fun. We're going to have fun. Appreciate y'all, man. Thank y'all. This is fun. I really enjoy doing these. I really enjoy y'all interacting, and really enjoy talking Texans, talking football, and having some fun here on the YouTube. So appreciate y'all. We're calling it a night. Everybody sleep good, eat good, and be good. We'll talk to you soon here on the channel.